The one thing you can be sure of in any recession is that it's gonna suck. There ain't no two ways about it. You'll all be working harder than ever and for less of a reward. You'll always be choosing between the least bad of two bad options. You're going to have to be convincing people, including your staff, that there is no third rosy, everyone is happy scenario. And I can't tell you how often I had to say something to my staff or to a town hall or something and say, well, that's why we call it a recession and we don't call it a party. It sucks. But just like in good times, you can use a recession to gain on your competitors. The first is to do your best to anticipate and reduce costs ahead of time. One example for us is the recession had begun in a couple of our businesses, and I was having an operating plan meeting with our aerospace business, and they said, here's $100 million in cost ideas. We don't want to implement right now, but if things get tough, then we can run to these. My comment to them was, do them right now. That whole $100 million, make it happen right now, because whatever you think the sales are going to be, it isn't going to happen. And of course, they didn't. When it comes to how do you think about your business, there's three constituencies you want to keep in mind: customers, investors, and employees. The first one, customers, they have to get priority. Whether it's quality, delivery, new products that you've committed to customers are going to be ready on time, none of that can stop. You don't want to abate any of that. The reason for that is you need those customers to still be there later. They're going to remember this. If you don't do a great job for customers throughout the recession, you're going to hurt both investors and employees. Well, that means the brunt of the problem, the fall off, falls on investors and employees. And this is where it gets tough, because now you have to figure out what are all the things you can do to provide a greater than your peers' return, and at the same time minimize impact on employees as best you can. It's a difficult thing to do. One of the ways to help you accomplish those two things for investors and employees and minimize the impact the best you can on both is that start thinking about the recovery in the middle of the recession. How are you going to prepare for the recovery? So the first one is, how do you think about labor? Because all costs in any company can be broken down into two areas: money that you pay to people and money that you pay to suppliers. So when it comes to people, think about furloughs instead of layoffs. And a lot of people like layoffs because it only affects, say, 10 or 15% of the workforce and everybody else is unaffected. But it also kills your industrial base, right? At some point, there's going to be a recovery. You're going to need those people in order to be able to handle the recovery. And think of it this way. If you decide to lay off 10% of your workforce, it takes you 6 months before they can be gone. And you still need to pay them for part of that time, severance and so on. So it takes you 6 months to get your money back when they're not there. Then you get a return for about 6 months, and then everybody comes back because the recovery's begun. Think of it this way. If somebody said, tell you what, spend 6 months building a plant, 6 months you get your money back, 6 months you get a return, then you have to shut the factory, all the finance guys would say, oh, that's ridiculous. We're not going to do that. Yet we do it with people all the time when we run into this kind of situation. So look at furloughs instead. I'm not going to say people like it better, but when the recovery comes, you're better prepared and they're a lot happier about what they were able to do. Look at benefits instead of changing compensation. People need the comp to live. And if you're doing furloughs, they're already seeing reductions in compensation. So look at things like, can you affect the sharing rate that you use in 401ks or other areas, things that aren't going to hit them in the pocketbook right away. Third one is go after bonuses aggressively. We cut bonuses by 2/3 and we cut mine to 0. And then when we paid them in shares so that there'd be a much greater chance that they could recover their money when the share price went up. So that has you working on the labor side. Now, what do you do with suppliers? There's a tendency not to pay attention to suppliers in a recession, and there's this kind of compounding effect that happens. So let's take aerospace. Flight hours go down by 6% for airlines. What they do is they reduce their spares orders to Honeywell by 25% because they're going to work off their inventory for a while. What does Honeywell do? We have inventory. We've just seen our orders cut by 25%. So we cut our orders to the supplier by 50%. You keep doing this down the chain, and when a recovery comes, you see just the opposite effect. And this poor guy down here is seeing like 200% increases in orders, and he's unable to satisfy them. So what do you do if you want to get ahead on the recovery? What you do is start talking with those suppliers in the middle of the recession and making sure that you're getting ahead of this. Buy capacity from them if you need to, make upfront payments, but do things to make sure that you're the one assured of supply when that recovery does come. And it does come. Our aerospace business did supremely well in spares as a result of following that philosophy. Recession is just an intensely unpleasant time. However, you can still use it to gain on your competition like we did.